Thank you everybody for joining in. This is a webinar on finance, 5 tips and tricks for Dynamics NAV 2018. Before we shoot into the webinar itself, I'm just going to burn through a quick slide deck about iNECTA University and what we're all about. And more importantly, we're warming up for our on-site training in Chicago in November. Days and 2 half days of intense Dynamics NAV finance bootcamp. You can go on NACTA.com and click on the university and register right there and see more details about what's going to be included. So quick introductions myself. My name is Björgvin. Feel free to call me B, as most people do. I'm the sales director for iNECTA, and with me today is Johannes Gudmundsson, and he's going to be sharing his finance tips and tricks with us today. And of course, most importantly, after everything, we're going to go into the raffle. We actually have a random name generator ready during this webinar, so we are actually tabulating everybody that is joining in on the call as they join in and they go into the list. You have to stick around to the end of the webinar in order to see if your name pops up as the winner of a Surface Go, the new Surface from Microsoft. It's a super cool tablet. It's a powerhouse. It can hook up to your screen. It can go with you on the road. It's pretty neat. So stick around for that. So we're going to talk about the on-site training in Chicago in November. I'm just briefly going to jump through the tips and tricks that we're going to talk about later, and then we'll go straight into the raffle. So we're going to be live in Chicago in November 12th through the 16th. So we fly in on a Monday. We start at lunch, so you have time to fly in during the morning. And then we have full days, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then we end on a half day on the Friday. So you have time to fly back home then. We have a room discount for hotels in the area, and we're happy to help you with any type of questions you have regarding the on-site training. Most of the information is on the website. If you can't find it there, then just reach out to us and we'll help you out. iNECTA University is a part of iNECTA. Our point is just to be right there with you. We've been helping people out with implementations of Dynamics for 17 years as a Microsoft Gold certified partner. We took it a step further about a year ago where we started iNECTA University, and our main focus there is the coffee mug tutorials, which we post twice a week. We are now in Business Central pretty much solely, but we have a ton of old videos on features in Dynamics NAV, all the way from 2015 to 2018 as well. So definitely go onto YouTube and check out everything there. And as of this year, we started on-site classes. We did the first one in New York earlier this year, and we're doing the second one now in Chicago after a very favorable reception from the first one. We have a third one already lined up in Atlanta in January, which is going to be Business Central specific. We're not dipping into any particular part of Business Central, but it's going to be an overview of all the capabilities, and pretty much the entire system is under review for that week in Atlanta. More to come on that later. Quick intro on what we're going to do today. Johannes has a slide deck that he's going to show each topic before every tip and trick. So I'll let you guys sit through this for a little bit before we dig into it. Thanks again for joining. And Johannes, when you're ready, I'll stop my screen share.
Yep. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you perfect, Johannes. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And the screen is visible.
Yes.
Okay, great. So thanks everyone for joining in. It's just a quick session, 5 items running through actually B walked up to me and say, hey, let's have a webinar for 5 tips and tricks in finance. And I was like, oh my God, okay, sure. There's like 1,000 tips and tricks in finance and everywhere else. So picking 5, it's very hard. But I was kind of looking to pick things that are not really obvious and kind of touch on many areas within the finance. So things that kind of came to me as like, really, why? and then later on, there's an explanation that came to it. So let me just start with the chart. So if I'm going here into customers, we go into the list of customers. Everybody knows this, pretty simple. So always up here, we have this show us list and show us chart. And sometimes people accidentally click on this show us chart, and it comes up with this funky thing, and I'm going to click in a minute. And then they come back to the list, they go like, wait, what happened to my list? I'm seeing this funky chart thing, or not even a chart, some settings. And this actually is on every single list in 2018, or a lot of lists. And to me, there was like, why? Why do we want to show everything as a chart? And I think that was just Microsoft going like, hey, this is really cool. We can have that on every single page. Maybe somebody will find a reason to use it, which is fine. But on the customer list, actually, if you click on show us chart, we have this, and I actually did set this up. So you're not gonna, if you click on yours today, you're not gonna get this because you're probably gonna get the settings. But here is the balance due for each one of the customers as a bar chart. So how do you actually set this up? When you're in here, the best way to do it is just right click and go into customize. And when you get into customize, you can actually select the measures. And as you can see here, I have selected the balance due, and it's aggregating, summing up. And then on the x-axis, I have the name. So we can see the name of the customer across. And so now this is set for this type of a list, or for the customer list. And whenever I get in here, I can see the bar chart. So, whether we can use it on every single list in NAV 2018, probably not. And so it's probably just a nuisance than actually having to be there for those lists. But you can actually drive some usefulness out of it, and especially like the customer list. You can do some more filtering, taking out the zeros, and stuff like that. But it is limited to just this setup screen. So that was that. Do try to use it. And if you get out of this list, like I just went into the item list here, and I go back into customers, you can see that it goes straight into the chart. And so somebody coming in here forgetting that they had it, set on chart will go like, where did my customer list go? So put it back on list when you're done using it. Another one that I wanted to get into is called GL account categories. I'm just going to go ahead and look for that here. So this screen looks really cool. But again, people wonder why do we need to set this up? What's the importance here? So what this relies on is that you, on the chart of account, will for every single account set up which category it actually goes into. And then you can open them up here. You have this nice tree, and it's summing up. If you haven't seen this before, or you're using a version where this is not, you don't have access to this, it kind of looks really cool. It kind of consolidates the headers and sums up, and you can drill into it. And also, you have like additional report definition. So here, for example, these are current liabilities from operating activities. And then you have long-term liabilities from financing activities. So it's in words more than just numbers. It's not just a GL account that happens to be in the 20,000 range that is a liability account. It also has the explanation of being financing. And that is great. And you could think to yourself, well, maybe if I set this up, I could then report from that somewhere. I can filter on financing activities and see only the financing activities part. And yes, you can totally do that. With Power BI, you can filter on that, get that information, separate it out into some report. That report, however, does not exist right now, so you'd have to create it. It would be nice if Microsoft actually folded it out too. But another piece of information which is important and related to this is that the system is intelligently filtering to, inside the selections. And this is something I didn't realize until later. So if I actually go here in inventory posting setup, right here. So if you're in finance and you've worked with NAV, you had to learn this screen. And this is, of course, the posting group screens. We have like several videos on this, and this can be very complicated if you want it to be. But the nice thing about here is if I'm in the inventory account, and I look up here into my possible inventory accounts, notice that this list is now filtered. It's only showing about 9. And that's because by the account category, I know which ones are assets. And therefore, I can just display asset accounts. So it is using the GL account categories to try to take away the noise. It used to be that before GL account categories, whenever you looked up into the chart of account to select accounts, you would always get the entire chart of account. And then you had to scroll down into the asset accounts and figure out which one was the right. Here it's now targeted. So it's a nice tip, so to speak. This one was on the GL account categories. The next one I was going to go into is budgets. I'm not sure how many people are budgeting or using the budget module. Some are, some aren't. I think the budget module is vital. You should definitely start using it if you're not using it. But with that being said, there's a very funky thing inside NAV. So if you go into budgets, and here there are 2 budgets in the Cronus database. And I go into, let's see, edit budgets right here. So this is where I actually create a budget for the chart of accounts. And you can do it by month or your quarter or however granular you want. And you can take this budget and you can actually export it to Excel. So how do we populate this? You can of course go and start typing in numbers everywhere, or exporting it to Excel, fill it up in Excel, and then importing it back. That's of course a good way. But many of these accounts are stable. They're like accounts that keep going the same thing every year. And you want to kind of get those accounts done with quickly, like office rent. I'm not going to do any different than office rent next year. We have 3 offices. There are no increases, or maybe I want to accommodate for a 10% increase just in case there's some maintenance, and that's it. Don't want to really think about those. So it would be nice to actually be able to generate a budget from history, right? And we don't have that here. So how can we do that? Well, if you actually go into the chart of accounts, and I'm just gonna pick one account here, something like sales, materials, domestic. And if I go into navigate up here and into GL account balance budget, then I have actually something called create budget up here in actions. And this, in my mind, should be on the budget screen. It should not be here. So this is a trick, I guess, or incorrectly placed label for Microsoft. But anyways, so if I go into create budget, I can do from history. And here is a process that I can run. And I know it's filtered right now on sales raw materials domestic. And you can see here that it's going to filter on that in creating it. If I remove this filter, I can create it or set the filter for another account. I can create it for many accounts at once. And here I can say the history beginning date, budget beginning date, how many periods, what size of the period, if there's a change going upwards or downwards, and then just hit OK and it generates it. So if you're doing budgets and you've been copying from Excel back and forth the historical ones, this might actually help you out more. So maybe the best thing to do is to take those stable accounts, generate the budget for them from history, copy that into Excel, modify in Excel those difficult ones like sales projections and stuff like that, and then import back. Might be a quicker way to do it. All right, so that was the budget from history one. So the fourth one that I wanted to go into is the cash flow date. So I'm not sure how many people are using the cash flow module. I'm going to throw it out there. It's probably a small portion of you. However, I highly recommend getting into that. If you're doing cash flow management, in Excel or somewhere, try to get the cash flow module working. It has a lot of features and functionalities. So I'm just going to go here into cash flow. And for those of you who are not sure what the cash flow module is, just give you a quick intro on that. The cash flow module allows you to manage cash flows inside NAV with taking into account, not accurate dates. For example, the invoices or the aging that you have, or accounts receivable outstanding, is not going to get paid on time. Not all of it. Some of it is. Some of it is going to be late. And so you want to account for that in your cash flow analysis. If you just look at NAV and the straight due dates that are on the invoices there, it's not going to give you a correct picture. So for example, if I go in here, cash flow, actually, let me just first go into the cash flow worksheet. The way it works is that you go ahead and hit suggest worksheet lines, and it brings in all of the AR, all of the AP, all of the liquid funds that are in the system and into a worksheet, which you could modify if you wanted to, but if you have a lot of invoices, it's almost impossible to be modifying this line by line. So it's more like just taking a look at it and then posting it through. And so once you post this or register this, this has absolutely no effect on any GLs. This is just to create your report. That's all it does. So you're not messing up any of your data anywhere. If I actually register this, and then I go back into this availability by period, and this is, by the way, one screen you can look at it. There are many different screens where you can see the cash availability. We now see by week our cash availability. So you can see here that the receivables are 52,000, payables are 2,000, so we're net 51,000. And then it just keeps going, and you can see how your net actually goes up, your payables, etc. So, like I said before, the problem with this screen here, this all looks really pretty, is that the dates are just incorrect. Your receivables are just not going to be like that. And how can you make a more realistic view of this screen? So that's a tip. What we can do is when we set up the cash flow forecast, if we go into edit this, there is something called consider cash flow payment terms. This is a really nice feature. If you check this off, you can set different payment terms for the customer for cash flow than it is for normal payment terms. So just to show you, if I go out of here into my home screen, into customer, and I take a look at the Canon group right here, and I go into payments, the payment screen, My payment terms for this customer is a month. And I think this has payment discount if they pay within 8 days. But for the cash flow purposes, it's 1 month. But let's say, for example, they usually pay later than that. I can then set a specific cash flow payment terms over here, which is considered in the cash flow. So that will push it out even further. And that might give you a more realistic way of looking at things. But just this has been taken even further, not in the standard, but with some modifications and even with artificial intelligence, where the system is predicting the payment terms for a customer and automatically assigning realistic payment terms. So that needs a little bit of customization, but at least you can set it up like this. And if you want to be conservative in your cash flow, you just push it out. And then you can see how things fall in. All right. So that was the cash flow. And finally, I said I was going to go through this quick. We're going to do a little bit of a trick. This is a trick that's been used for a very long time, and many of you probably know this. But if we're looking at the chart of accounts, and you really wanted to see how a posting is posting into the system without hitting navigate per se, you want to see it on the chart. How do you easily see, if you posted, for example, a sales order, which accounts did it hit, and what is the effect on your chart of accounts? This is really important when you're testing out new things. If you added new posting groups, if you're adding taxes, something like that, that are going to be hitting other accounts, then you want to just isolate the accounts on the chart of account which you are hitting. And this has worked all the way back to the character-based version, so it's a really old one. So the way to do that is, so usually, let me see this. Usually when you come into the system and you show more here, you'll only see the filters for standard filters per se, so like only for the number, for the name, etc. But if you actually click on here, on chart of accounts, you can select limit totals. And in order to apply this trick, you need to see the limit total. So what a limit total will allow you to do is add a filter for date right here. And inside that, you could type in a particular date. So I'm going to put in 01/18/20. This is a date where I know there's only one posting, and I'm drilling into that posting. So as I type in this date filter, the net change column over here only looks at postings for that particular date. Right? So what I want to do further to that is I want to filter the columns around here, net change, to only show me non-zero items. So that is less than more than 0. Now I'm looking at only anything that had any change for that particular day. And finally, I don't really care about all these header accounts. There's a lot of header accounts. So I'm gonna only look at posting accounts right here. So I filter to posting accounts. And now I can see how the transaction played out. So I can see that it hit customers foreign, vendors domestic, sales retail, and purchase raw materials. This is a funky one, but anyways, I hope the message got across though. So if you filter on one day, you know there's only one posting on a day. If you're doing in the demo system, just pick a day into the future. Like in this case, this is the January 18th, 2 years from now. And then filter on non-zero, filter on posting, and you have those transactions. And then of course you can go and drill into these like normal NAV. That was those 5 items. Like I said, I promised I wouldn't take much of your time. I hope you enjoyed it and you got something out of it. So until next webinar, maybe I'll hand it over to B.
Yeah, thank you, Johannes. This was fantastic. We do have one question. If you stick around just for a couple of minutes, Walter McFarland was asking if he could integrate the Power BI finance and HR data into the budget data per customer for total expense purposes. Johannes.
Yeah, I'm still here. So, yeah, I mean, you can basically with budget, it's a matter of where you're going to display it. So if you have Power BI as displaying the budget, you can pull the budget data from NAV into Power BI and visualize that. And that data that's in the budget can come, of course, from any module. NAV, of course, the budgets in NAV are based on finance or chart of accounts. So it's GL data that's being budgeted, and that data can be budgeted by dimension. So if you want to budget it further out, if, for example, you're looking at HR, you could then have a separate dimension for HR and budget that out. But the visualization of budgets usually comes into account schedules, analysis views, and Power BI. So I hope that answered the question.
Thank you. Yeah, Walter, I hope so. Feel free to click on the Q&A if you want to throw in another question. You're very welcome, Walter. Well, thanks again, Johannes, and thank you everybody for joining. I can see almost everybody stuck around for the entire session. I hope it was because of the awesome tips and tricks, but I assume it's also because of the raffle for the Surface Go. Nikki, our random generator expert, has been working hard in the background, tallying everybody in that's been joining the call to make sure that everybody is included for the raffle and a name has been selected. Klaus Peterson is the proud owner of a brand new Surface Go. And Klaus, congratulations. You are worthy of it for sure. And we'll reach out to you after the demo and get your shipping information and get that shipped over to you. Again, thanks everybody for joining in. We will send out a link to the recording, which we will publish on our YouTube page later today. And we'll keep you posted on any further activities coming from iNECTA University.